Cool. Okay. I think we can go ahead and get started, at least with our little icebreaker poll. Um, Sweet. So for those who have just joined, we always like to start our Matic webinars with a little bit of an icebreaker. It's a new tradition. And today's icebreaker is, which of these feels most relatable to your day-to-day in ops? The options are, I've duct taped a process together just to keep the lights on. I spend more time fixing tools than using them. I'm scaling a process I barely had time to build. I'm the only one who knows how this thing works, and I fear for my PTO. I'm being asked to automate something no one fully understands. So as you come in, go ahead and answer the question, but I'm going to ask our panelists, which of these do you most relate to?
I can go.
Mhm.
So I would definitely say I align with that. I'm the only one who knows how this thing works, and I fear for my PTO. I think a lot of the tools that we use, there's a limited number of admin seats, and those seats are usually provisioned for CS ops or CS leadership. So in the event that I'm building something and if it's not documented properly, or if there's not a clear sense of handoff in the event that I am not available either that day or that week for a PTO reason, there's definitely some gaps that we could fall into. So I do try to make sure that things are as well documented as possible. Um, that new projects do kind of like go under some kind of fine-tooth comb with like leadership just to make sure that we're building the right thing and they're aware of what we're building. But then there's some things that do need to be set up by myself, like using SQL code for like pulling in data points and things of that nature that I might not be able to pass off, but at least like in the grand sense and in the macro sense, um, making sure that things are well documented and that there's more ownership than just yourself, something that I try to improve on every day.
So what I'm also hearing is your team misses you a lot when you're out of office.
Yeah, I would say so. I try to really get in there and prove my worth and and just try to show up for them every single day in any way that I can. But at the same time, I'm only one person, and you don't want what is colloquially coined as that single point of failure that could run us into an issue where there's one person that's provisioning all of these really important things, and then there's no way to replicate those like wonderful things that you've built because you're not there. So you need to, that's the other side of the coin that you need to prepare for too.
For those who just joined, you should see an icebreaker poll up. Go ahead and answer that. And our panelists are sharing their thoughts. Emily and Nikki, which of these resonate with you?
Just to follow up on what Eric said, I've done this in two different worlds. One where I'm, to your point, Eric, I'm it, like all the integrations are me and like, that kind of thing. And my internal out of office is always just all the contact information for our CSMs at our tools. And being like, if something breaks, these CSMs, their whole job, like they should be able to be like jump on it and help you. And then I've done it in like more of the mountain world where we actually have like a systems team. So when I'm building things, I'm not the admin. So I'm creating more like a business requirements document and putting everything together. So the nice thing is when I go out of office, our systems team is actually the expert on like troubleshooting and things like that, which is very nice. But I would say in general, the scaling a process I've barely had time to build and automating a process that no one really fully understands are the ones that like right now, especially with like AI, everyone's like automate everything. And it's funny because I always try to remind people like, companies scaled. Like 5 years ago, companies knew how to scale without AI. And you still need to have like the foundation and you still need to try it manually and you still need to like have a pilot group and do this small and actually verify the results that you're having because otherwise you're creating an automation and then 3 weeks later completely changing the automation and then 3 weeks later and you're just bleeding ops headcount when you're just constantly doing that instead of starting small and then focusing your efforts on things that you've already verified are like correct.
I love that it was two for you. It's never ever, it's very rarely just one thing, right? When it comes to fires. Nikki, how about you?
So I think for me, speaking to the point about I'm the only one who knows how things work. So I actually think we've done a really good job on our team of making sure that more than one person knows how things work because of this exact issue of if someone were to go somewhere or take a time off, it would be a mess. But I would say the processes ones, scaling processes, I've barely had time to build. I feel like, especially with a smaller company or a startup, you have to like learn on the go and kind of, I guess, build the plane as you're flying it sometimes. And um, yeah, I've definitely found myself in that scenario a few times, but definitely something we try to avoid.
Awesome. Thank you all for sharing. And thank you for everyone who responded. For those curious, we actually had three answers tie. I duct taped a process together just to keep the lights on. I'm scaling a process I barely had time to build. And I'm being asked to automate something no one fully understands. Sounds like we're all thriving, that's always a good thing. Cool. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to our Matic webinar on how ops teams are supercharging customer success. I'm going to have our panelists introduce themselves, but one thing to call out, Rosa was unable to join today. She's a little under the weather, so we're sending positive vibes for a quick healing journey. For all those who have joined, if you have any questions throughout this presentation, go ahead and drop it in the chat or use the Q&A functionality. We'll be monitoring and also answering questions at the end. So with all of that said, I'm going to hand it over to our panelists to introduce themselves. Emily, do you mind kicking us off?
Absolutely. So I'm Emily Christine. I'm currently an operations manager for our customer success and our customer experience team at Mountain. We're a connected TV performance advertising platform. So the ads you get on your various streaming services, you're welcome. That is us. I have been in operations now. This will be my third company being CS operations. And before, so I've done like where I was the 20th employee and I was the first CS hire and we built it from the ground up. And then I've also done where we are now, which is like 500 plus company. They've had RevOps for forever. And before I was in ops, I actually was a CSM and was a support person. So I actually came from the CS world and then moved into operations. I'll hand it over to Eric.
All right. Hi, my name's Eric Arnson, and I'm a restaurant technical analyst for our company at Bento Box, specifically for our CS organization. A lot of my day-to-day responsibilities lead into the systems that our team uses. So I'm a technical lead for a lot of the system integration projects with our parent company, which is Fiserv, who also owns Clover, which is a point of sale company. So those different systems include our CRM, which is Catalyst with Clover, Qualtrics that we use for our NPS and our CSAT surveys, and we also have a complaints management and escalation process through a reporting tool called Emma. So I manage those as well. One of the main responsibilities that I have is to drive strategic initiatives in terms of our systems. So identifying those strategic priorities for CS and to develop technical roadmaps to support the team in those endeavors. And similar to Emily, I've also started in a CS background, but as an onboarding manager, which is mostly a project manager for website development. So we would have our customers who would sign up for our services, and after sales, they would go through this pre-launch onboarding experience where we would set up their site, educate them, train them on the product, and then make sure that they had all the tools that they needed to ensure their success when they push that go live button. So from years of joining that, my time with CS ops is relatively low, about 2 years, but learning a lot, and our team is continuing to grow. And I'll pass it to Nikki.
Thanks. I'm Nikki. I am a strategy and operations manager at Hinge Health, and I'm focused specifically on our client reporting strategy. Hinge Health is a digital clinic that provides virtual physical therapy solutions for joint and muscle pain. It's a B2B company, so it might be a benefit that you have at your own company. Prior to my role here, I have always been in operations. I've done client success ops, I've worked in product ops, and I've also done sales ops. So I have a very end-to-end view of operations at various companies. And I've kind of found my way back into client success ops because I enjoy it, and that's how I kind of made my way here.
Thank you all for the intros and also being here. I'm super excited about this panel. I think we have a breadth of experience from going 0 to 1 with CS Ops, but also being able to share what CS Ops, when it's successful and good, looks like. Customer success, right? They're under the gun nowadays, especially now that they're being tied to revenue, which is why they're also getting a little bit more ops love, just like their sales counterparts have been getting for years. The first question I have, and Emily, this is for you, maybe you can kick us off. Metrics, metrics, metrics. That's mostly all anyone cares about, it feels like sometimes. So maybe we can start with what CS metrics should ops teams focus on first when trying to support customer success?
Yeah. So the way that I always approach this anytime, because it's going to be different for any company, I'll kind of start with that. I've worked at companies where it was all about huge contracts and there was a formal, 6 to 9 month renewal. And so renewals were obviously the biggest thing, right? But with Mountain, we're a much more there's no contracts and it's much more like monthly revenue and what is your spend and things like that. So it's going to be completely different. So the first thing that I always say is what is depending on kind of the structure of your company, what is the board asking of your CS organization? What are the things that when they present on your organization are showing whether or not your organization is providing the ROI of having this proactive support model for your customers, and then working backwards from that. So again, if TTV is the biggest thing, right? If your company has identified that if people go live quickly, that they just inevitably spend, right? If they're seeing that happy customers at the beginning just tend to stay with you longer, then TTV is likely going to be the metric to, time to value or your time to go live, et cetera. So that's one example. But I've seen CSQLs being really important for organizations that are not necessarily the revenue drivers, but are definitely there to help source those opportunities and hand them back to sales. Obviously, if your CS organization is the one owning the revenue, then it's a little bit more about your NRR, your GRR, things like that. But one of the interesting ones for me that's been recent is AI deflection rate. So this is a little bit more on the customer experience side of things, but because we're one org here at Mountain, one of the biggest things was we have to be able to scale and we have to be able to address way more questions about our product without a human being involved. So one of the ones that we check in on frequently that is a purely ops owned one is that AI deflection rate, because you're helping your headcount, right? So those are just a few examples of based on that. And then I guess the last one that I would say is just product usage, product health, those types of things. The more you can tie your CS actions, especially those proactive ones, specifically to things coming from the platform itself and have those two things work together, I think the better your CS organization is going to work in general.
That AI deflection rate, that is a new one I'm hearing. Out of curiosity, Nikki and Eric, do you have any AI related metrics popping up in your world?
I do not at the moment, but this is also a learning experience for me too. I'm learning more about metrics that other CS ops teams use.
Yeah, not necessarily metrics, but one thing that we are running into with AI is a unification of systems in terms of what type of AI that we're using. So, because we're a part of Fiserv, that's our parent company, they're pretty strict in terms of what types of AI that we're able to use. So similar to any other site, like certain things are blocked, but we also know that there are these AI tools and functionalities within these other systems that we parlay. So it's definitely, we haven't really been able to leverage those because everything is through the Copilot is really the only one that we're allowed to use that's approved. So we kind of have to skirt around in terms of like, we have to deal with this other layer of if it's something that we truly want, we have to make a case for it and build out an entire report, really listen to our CS team and see what are the different like optimizations, what are the functionalities that you get from this that you can't get from something else. So it's another layer that we have had to explore with our acquisition was back in 2021. So kind of like bit by bit, we're slowly learning like these are the things that are kind of acceptable, and then these are the things that these are also the constraints that we have to work in through. So it's interesting in that regard.
It's funny, the way LinkedIn makes it out to be is that if you tell your CFO AI, they're going to sign immediately. So,
I wish.
um, so a lot of people in our crowd today, right? They might be in revenue ops, they might be in sales ops, or they might just be starting in CS ops. What's one small initiative your team implemented that had an outsized impact on CS outcomes and, can get a win on the board?
So speaking for what we've done at BentoBox, we have a lot of moving pieces in terms of other systems that we are migrating to. So one piece that was a huge win was our migration off of Salesforce into this new CRM called Catalyst. And one of the things that we had to consider was how some of our teams are able to manage different projects, different setups, different opportunities using the CRM that they're not going to have access to anymore. That's going to be pretty like trickled down in terms of what they were able to access previously. So one initiative led by one of my colleagues, Anna Wetmore, was moving all of that project management into Asana. So we were pretty quickly able to parlay resources that we already had and also just like dive a little bit deeper into this tool that we use every day and just say, can we use certain objects from the CRM and then just rebuild them and actually like optimize our time like, using this tool that is already approved that we already use. So that was definitely it was like became a big initiative for sure, but the infrastructure was there. So it really was just a question of understanding what we already had in our pocket, what we were using every day, and figuring out a way to make that work. So one of the biggest things that we did was create a template project that has all of the different steps and identifiers and stages that we used in Salesforce for this project management and just rebuild it in Asana. And now not only is the experience with our project management team a lot more concentrated, but they're able to be a lot more collaborative than they were in Salesforce. With Salesforce, you got a lot more, I guess, like data and infrastructure there. But with Asana, it really is a project management tool. So it's as simple as saying, like, what are you trying to do and what is this tool used for? And figuring out a way to mesh them.
Emily,
And
Nikki.
oh, I was just going to say, and if you're not using Asana, Notion can do the same thing. It is also cool for that. Yeah, the two things I kind of went like thought about this in two different directions. One was I'm a huge fan of office hours. I do this. I've done it at various frequencies, but at my current company, we do it every 2 weeks. Open hour, totally volunteer. People can come and go at any point during the hour, and they can ask anything. But because ops tends to know our tools better, we tend to know like all the niche things that maybe aren't formalized. But you'd be amazed how hungry CS reps are to just learn tools better and do it in a time that's sort of set aside. So it only takes an hour of my time. I don't really have to prep for it because I don't really know what questions people are going to show up with. But by the end of that hour, I will see reps then go out and they're using they're using the AI in Gong now, or they're using, Quip docs a little bit better than they used to, or, you know, all of these different things. And you get this feedback of them being like, that was so helpful. And you're like, I didn't do anything, right? So it's like really low lift, but has a high impact. And then the other one I called out is just that, like, and you'll hear me say this a million times, is everyone underutilizes Slack, in my opinion. Slack can do so much more than people think it can. And if it's the only thing in your tech stack, and then you've got like a much more like low level CRM or just like entry level tools, Slack can get you so far into what you're trying to do. So we actually, there's a really like cheap, like very affordable out of the box tool called Centro that we use to connect our Slack to our Salesforce. And so like every time we had a new customer, it would automatically create like the internal channel, the external channel. It would add all of the right people to those channels, including the customer. It would then link those to the actual records in Salesforce. So every time there was a discussion happening in a thread, it was on the account layout or whatever layout in Salesforce. And it just like wildly changed the way that we were able to interact with like engineering and sales and things like that in Slack, but never lose any of those conversations in Salesforce. And it was like very easy to set up, but it was one of those things that regardless of the tool, I think connecting Slack to everything you possibly can is a great idea.
So y'all touched on like Asana, Notion, Slack, and the Slack tool for automation. Is there any other workflows or automations that were easy wins for your team when first engaging with CS?
I'll kick us off on this one. It's funny because I didn't realize I had Slack twice in a row when I was like brainstorming my answers. In addition to office hours, one of the specific workflows that I always implement as soon as possible at a company is like an Ask Ops channel. That is not open. It's not, people can't just type in anything. They use a workflow to ask a question, it submits it, and then I have as soon as they submit that, it adds it to a Slack list that has like a status, and I can track it. I can export it in the future if I ever want to do like an analysis of the types of questions. Also shout out to like, if you have an approved chat GPT, please don't upload your company data into your own rogue one. Don't do that. But like I will upload those lists after a while into like chat GPT and be like, what are the FAQ docs that I need? What are the like updates to documentation that I need? And it will just like spit it out. And so it's like really, really helpful, but it creates this idea of like ops being available and being able to provide like really fast responses as opposed to like always doing a formal ticket. And at the same time, because it's Slack and because you're using a workflow, there's not this expectation of like immediate response. So it's sort of this great, like, hey, is your question not like, I truly can't do anything, right? That's more urgent. That needs to like be a thing. But if it's more like low level, I just find that, again, it helps reps move really quickly. It helps managers not have to answer every single question. So that's a big one for me specifically.
I have some thoughts on this one as well. Slack +1, love it. Actually got some great ideas from you, Emily, about incorporating workflows, because right now we have like an open Slack channel, and that was definitely a quick win for us with just having a place where anyone can come and ask questions. Not only does it help with visibility of the question, so if 3 people have the same question, they can kind of go back and search in the channel, like, has this already been asked? Um, Also, it's a place where other CSMs might quickly answer the question, and I don't have to, or someone on my team can, and it's a good way to triage everything the CS ops team is, or the CSMs are kind of concerned about. And then another one that we've implemented and we've had for a while is a weekly newsletter. That one has been, we've gotten consistent praise from the CSMs about, but we kind of tailor it to the client life cycle or where we are in the year, what's like top of mind for our CSMs. We have a good mix of some like FAQs, we have some reminders, we'll have some just like product launches. We can just keep everything all in one place so that CSMs aren't searching for what's new, what's available. It's all kind of given to them on a weekly cadence. And we had put some fun stuff in there too about other CSMs and what's new with people's lives. And it's just kind of, it's fun but informative.
Internal comms is so important. Like, I think we take so much of it for granted too. So love that idea. So when you look back at your time, like supporting CS, what's one thing you wish you had done earlier from the start, like in the beginning?
I can take this one. So I think the first instinct when planning ops related projects is to tackle, the largest issues at hand and kind of and look for like what are the biggest issues we can tackle. Um, and while that is definitely necessary, I think that those projects can also take a long time to implement. And I've kind of learned over the years that really taking the time to, talk directly to your CSMs and understand what their day-to-day pain points actually are, gives you some ideas for quick wins and things you can implement in a week or in a day that over time, all of those small little wins added up can really make a positive change to a CSM's day-to-day um, life. So I think that's something that I wish I had started doing early on. And it's something that I am very intentional about now. Um, it's, for example, like these like small conversations kind of led us to building an executive one pager, which is when CSMs are talking to their client counterparts, they have these like big decks that they share. But we came up with a one pager, which is like a clean cut, like here are your key metrics that you can take to your own leaders at your own companies and highlight how Hinge Health is performing and how this is working for your employees. Or coming up with, quick like FAQ docs or resource hubs where CSMs can quickly go find things. Like these are things that really didn't take a long time to implement, but kind of came across our table just by having conversations with CSMs. So really listening to what the real issues are that CSMs care about.
Yeah, big plus one on the first thing you should do is get to know what your CSMs are doing on a daily basis. Like, what are they doing? Actually watch them. You'd be amazed how different what they're doing and what a leader tells you that they're doing might be. Not everywhere, but like sometimes. So definitely do that. I will also say one thing that's kind of unique to CS operations that I don't think is relevant to more like marketing ops or sales ops is I highly recommend being an expert on your platform. CS ops tends to need to understand the platform events, the queries, how it all works together, the impactful features. You just have to be a lot more in touch with that like go-to-market general sort of work. And I don't think that that's as necessary. So if you're like a general rev ops person who's now specializing in CS ops, I think take that time to get to know the product itself and become an expert as much as like your support team is.
And this question is kind of similar, but you might have a different answer. If you could give one piece of advice to an ops team just starting to work with CS, what would it be?
I would say service is really important. Um, Bento Box has a unique standing in the restaurant tech stack and with other vendors in that a lot of our company's employees are past restaurant employees. So they have been servers or they've bussed tables or they've worked front of house, back of house. Some of them have actually been chefs and sous chefs and went to culinary school. So run the gamut. I would say it's about 70 to 80% of our employee base has worked in a restaurant in some way, shape, or form. So that connection that our customer success teams from all different branches have with our restaurants is really important, and that empathy that they have. So when you're working in an operations role for customer success, it's really important to treat them with the same level of hospitality that the customer success team serves the customer, because ultimately it all trickles down. We have a really strong ethos that restaurant success and prosperity are at the core of everything that we do, and that we want to support restaurants in their mission of hospitality. So when CS Ops builds any new processes or comes up with any kind of documentation or presents on a new tool and how to use it, or even just like comes up with the tool that we're going to use, we want to make sure that we're doing what is best for customer success to make their lives easier, because ultimately then it will impact the customers that we service. So it's not just that customer success is working with these customers and then you're kind of over here doing what's asked of you. It really is a collaboration, and it really is, to Emily's point, an understanding of the product and what makes sense, and how that customer success team is able to successfully connect with that customer through the tools that they use. So any kind of information or move that we make, we always try to keep that in mind. So I would say that's one of the most important things. It is not just build things that you think are going to be successful, but really work together with your CS team and make sure, like, is this actually going to work for you? Does this make things easier? Can I get any feedback on this? It's really important to keep them in the loop on those conversations and on those innovations.
I love that you highlighted the empathy. I feel like there's a stereotype that ops people are very analytical, which is very true, but they're also some of the most empathetic people I've met so far. So
I'll jump in on this one a little bit. Especially again, if you're coming from more of the like general rev ops, or if you're coming from sales ops and now you're supporting CS as well, anything like that. I think in sales world, and I'll be kind when I say this, you're in general your fight is to get them to give you the information or to do the processes that you have put in place. When you get into CS, you have this opposite problem almost, where CSMs tend to be the most like, I will do anything for this customer. And they'll answer support tickets. They'll get on the phone at any time. They'll be deep in a customer's reporting. They'll do the work for the customer. And I think sometimes when you move into CS ops, you sometimes think like, oh, they don't need me as much, or like, oh, we can build whatever. But then you're like, why is it that we can't scale this? Why is it that we just constantly have to be hiring more people? Well, it's because your CSMs you almost have to rein them in a little bit. But you have to balance that with, don't rein them in on the things that are actually working, right? So sometimes I think we have this idea of like, why are you doing this thing? And we think we're right. And so we like really, really push for them to not do that. But sometimes those are really impactful things. And you should be more focused on like, okay, that's impactful. How do I make that easier? But I think in general with CS, it's more about like giving them clean swim lanes than necessarily trying to like force them to give you data, things like that. Typically, in my experience, CSMs are very good at like following process, especially if they've been enabled properly. But I think that's like the biggest thing, is you're actually kind of preventing them from doing everything and trying to focus them on more impactful things.
So we focused a lot on like, hey, you're just starting CS ops. What should you do? I feel like CS ops has been around forever, but that's actually not the case. So what does good look like? Because y'all are at more established companies where CS ops has been around. What does good look like? So first question in that vein, how do you structure your partnership with CS leadership? Is there a regular planning cadence or feedback loop? Like what does that partnership look like when it's good?
We have a few things that we do to work together with our leadership. One is a monthly stand up where we go over some of the wins and challenges from previous months. And it's not just CS team leads and leads from other departments. Like we have a design ops department and the content operations department. So we're hearing all of those things that went well for them, but then also some of the challenges that they had, which is great for ops because it's just another way that we can either get feedback on things that we're doing or try to investigate new opportunities where we could potentially make things easier for these different people, either through services that we already have or potentially exploring new services and new tools. So that's one. The other is that I think this is pretty rare where like a director of a team is in like a very frequent communication with our VP of customer success. I think sometimes like you meet bi-weekly or maybe monthly and you go over numbers and that's it. But our director pretty much has like weekly stand-ups or is in several meetings with our VP of customer success. So they're really working in tandem where anything that gets assigned to to us, like me and a few other select people in CS Ops, there's a very clear understanding of what is needed and like what actions we want to take, what problems there are, and then we can just move forward from that point. So getting that constant communication from top down is really important, just so that we don't have to hunt for it every single time, and it just gives us the time to focus on trying to solve a problem. We also work with all forms of CS leadership to confirm those projects, kind of the point I've made before, just to make sure that we're not building things in a vacuum, that we're just going over and showing trials or going through walkthroughs with different department leads and just asking questions, getting feedback, because we want to make sure that they're going to benefit from these tools that we're building or from these enhancements that we're making. So we definitely also just make sure to work together on those fronts and not just say, hey, this is something we did and now you can use it. It's like that usually doesn't end up well.
And when you think about supporting CS well, what are the top 2 to 3 operational levers you believe matter most and why?
Yeah, so I would say number one is I would say tooling. Tooling is a big operational lever. So I think the right tools can really amplify a CS team's impact by saving them a lot of time and therefore increasing their ability to take on more clients. Um, I think as an ops team, you have like the perfect positioning to really evaluate all of the tooling available to a CS team and really be thoughtful in how you implement new tooling and how it kind of fits into their existing workflows, and therefore drive adoption of the tools. And then I would say another lever would be having scalable data and reporting infrastructure. So thinking through how data is accessible to your CSMs and to yourself, having a strong foundation of really automated, reliable data, I think is one of the most powerful levers. And when CS teams have access to this kind of data, they can make insights about product usage, trends, health scores, client health scores, renewal risks. All of that is more clear to them, and really allows them to be strategic in their conversations instead of uh, just guessing. They can have more tactful conversations and strategy.
I'd also add enablement, I think, is one that ops kind of sometimes can drop the ball on a little bit, because we sort of feel like we picked the tool, we implemented the tool, we built the processes, here leaders, right? Like, and I think sometimes that ops can forget that change management exists for us too. So like, it's not just CSMs doing change management for their customers, it's also us. I'm sure, I don't know, Nikki, Eric, if you've experienced where you did a ton of work on a beautiful process and no one used it, or it like never really got off the ground because people didn't really quite understand it, or things like that. So to go all the way back to Eric's point at the very beginning, like documentation is a huge piece when it comes to making sure that you have coverage when you're out of office, but also like having a really good knowledge hub that's really easy to find and really accessible. And not ops doesn't always own that, but you can work with whoever is in charge of that to make sure that you're handing off all the work you've done in a way that really is impactful. And I'm also like, again, huge fan if you have an LMS of like sending out something that not only teaches them the process, but ask like really difficult questions. Ask questions that are gotchas, that make them think critically about the process. Don't just say, oh, hey, where do you go to click on this button, kind of a thing. Be like, you click on this button, you get this error. What do you do next, right? Like, help yourself, right? You're trying to avoid those tickets that are going to come into you after you implement this process. So if you want to get fewer of those like interrupt work where you are just constantly being inundated with questions, have really strong enablement. And then typically about a week after I do enablement, I have those office hours, and then we can have people bring in those questions there, try to get them answered there, send out follow-ups of like, hey, these were the common questions. And you just will see a lot smoother of a rollout. And then you can work on the next thing, instead of what happens a lot where you roll something out and you want to be done with it, but then you're sort of just caught in fixing it, re-enabling on it, no one's using it, what's going on, and you're just constantly stuck in that one project. So that's what I would say.
Nikki, you mentioned something around CSM capacity, right? Like, especially in today's economic climate, like the elephant in the room is all these layoffs. How much is CSM capacity like top of mind at your company?
It's probably one of our biggest metrics that we follow. So from a CS ops standpoint, it's how can we help the CS team, each CSM take on more clients, and what tools and resources can we make available that make all of the admin work or all of the time spent not with clients faster and easier and more efficient.
And are there any tools y'all recommend, like your favorites when it comes to increasing CSM capacity?
Well, this is a great time to plug Matic. Matic has been extremely, extremely useful for our CS team. We've received amazing feedback about how much time is saved. Since we are a healthcare company, we have a lot of user data that the CSMs have to, before Matic, had to dive into themselves and really spend hours, up to, sometimes 15 hours a week, depending on how many client conversations they had, just shuffling through data and putting decks together. And simply by automating that process, it has reduced the amount of time by up to like 70% for some folks. It's a huge, huge time saving, putting together decks.
I know that felt like a setup. I swear it wasn't.
It wasn't. I
Nice.
promise it wasn't.
Ops people, y'all are firefighters at the end of the day. It feels like there's always something burning. But how do you balance being that firefighter with being a strategic partner to CS?
This, I think, is another one where it's very different when you are the CS, you're the ops person and you're in startup world and you're the admin on every tool and you're the one designing process. I think firefighting in that one is a little bit more like you don't really have a choice. Like you're the only one who can fix it. And if it's blocking someone, like you got to get on it. But I think there is something to be said for, it's so simple, but like priority levels in those types of situations of like, and the way I always ask is I never say like, give me, is it a P0.1? I always am just like, is it impacting a customer's ability to use our platform? Is it impacting your ability to work with your customers? Or is it just impacting your ability to do like internal work, right? Like those are very different things. Like one, I'm going to jump on immediately because as ops, I'm not going to be the blocker to a customer using our platform. Like absolutely not. But at the same time, if it's more like internal, it's like, I appreciate you flagging this. We'll definitely get on it. But if I have like if I'm working on a big project that's going to like really impact the way that CS works, I don't necessarily need to jump on that right away. And then for like larger, like again, here at Mountain, we have an entire ops organization. We have a systems team, we have a BI team, we have ops managers. Like there is a lot of help there. And so for us, documentation, like business requirements documentation is the thing. Because as an ops manager, once you finish that process and you've fully documented, the idea is that you shouldn't need to be involved in the fires because the fires represent a system break or they represent something that really isn't you. It's like you have a team that built this, you've got everything documented, everyone understands like how it should be working. And so that allows you to have a little bit less of that interrupt work. But I mean, also just going back to avoid the fires by like dog fooding things and like trying them in small little groups instead of rolling it out for the entire one. So like as an example, we're working on syncing all of our platform data to Salesforce so that we can do a lot more automation. So we don't use a CS platform. We only have a CRM. And so we're trying to like still have a lot of those CS platform sort of automations work there. And when we were doing the sync, we've got like 10,000 plus accounts. And I was like, I'm not turning on a sync for all of these at once, right? So we like picked the lowest risk thing and we tested that. And I dealt with little fires here and there. But then when we launched the second one, there were no fires. when we launched the third one, there were no fires. So like also being intentional about how you roll processes out so you just have those less, but build that in as the strategic partner is kind of how I would do that.
Anything to add, Eric and Nikki?
Only thing I would also say is just being intentional with any strategic initiative. So I think sometimes we can come together and like an idea is mentioned in Slack and in an email, and then the people who give this idea think that we just record it and we put it away and then we like develop on it further. It's like, no, we really need to discuss it in more detail. So like firefighter things are more things that are just kind of like quick, this isn't working, please fix it, X, Y, and Z. But anything that's going to require more time, when like our CEO said to me one of the first days that I was working with her, she said, if it's if I can read it and it's not going to take me 5 seconds to read it, please just email me. And she said that with the intention that she really wants to take the time to go through and understand and like absorb all of that information to make sure that like I'm getting my point across and that she's understanding me. So it falls in the same vein as well, that you can't really be strategic on these platforms that like are meant to be just like quick communication. You really have to have the time set aside to go over all of that. So it's just being intentional, I feel, and also have an agenda. Like it's always good to say, this is what this meeting is about. So I think a lot of people sometimes like put a subject of a meeting and then schedule it, and then there's no context. And that's not really helpful because then you get into that meeting and you don't know what you're talking about. But you kind of have an idea and then you have to ask, and it's a little awkward and uncomfortable. Versus if you're going to schedule something, then say, this is what I'd like to discuss, throw it in a doc. Then we can all comment on it. And then we can come to that with a very strategic approach of like what we're trying to accomplish here on this call. So making sure that like you're owning those forms of communication in the right way.
I know we're nearing the end of our time, but before I ask my last question, just a reminder to all our attendees, you can drop any questions you have for this crew in chat or Q&A. So last question. What signs do you look for to know your work is actually moving the needle in CS?
When I'm thinking about if we're moving the needle with CS, I think I like to defer to the data for this one. So, we have our team we send out satisfaction surveys directly to our CSMs and where we ask them about questions around tool satisfaction, how often do you use this, how many hours have you saved, and really understand the value of the initiatives that we've implemented. And we also do time studies where we ask CSMs to actually track their week and write down like, okay, this is this morning, this is what I worked on, this is how much time I spent on this is how much time I spent on that. And it's a great way to just collect a lot of data and understand where CSMs are spending the most of their time, and maybe that's kind of led us to come up with initiatives and projects and think through or have a thoughtful approach to servicing them. Also,
Any other?
anecdotally, I sit next to all the CSMs, so they are very open and chat with me constantly, and they tell me what is good and what is bad, and I use that in my day-to-day planning.
CSMs are very cool. Love that about them.
In that same vein of data, the other layer is any form of NPS or CSAT that you have. If you notice that there's an increase or even a decrease in those scorings from like anything that you've originally rolled out, those tools could potentially have an effect on how CS is then reporting to their customers and working with their customers. And if all goes well, those scores should be increasing. Those sentiments that you're receiving from those surveys should also be like trickling in to kind of understand that. So it might not be like the total impact, but it might be a little part of it. So anytime that I see that our service interaction CSAT with our support team, we use Front as a tool for our emails, so we're able to track things like their time and like how long that they're on certain conversations. So there, I think it went up from like 78 to 87% in the course of a month. And there were a few things that we did in Front to try to make sure that customers were properly taken care of, or that escalations were going to the right channels and the right CSM was being tagged. And that collaboration really paid off in a very solid metric. So, so it's definitely like internal data, but even the way that customers are feeling about their experience is another great way that you can tell that the work that you're doing in ops is then impacting the day-to-day for your customer success that you're supporting.
Well, thank you to our panel for providing such a meaty conversation. I hope there was a lot of learnings and insights for the crew here. Any last thoughts you want to leave with our audience, CS Ops loving audience? No worries. That was a random question I'm asking. So y'all are good. Thank you again for your time. Hope everyone found this useful, and happy Friday, Junior.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Beth.
Bye, everyone.